Hello, everyone. Teshitele, and welcome to yet another episode of Tibet Talks. I'm Denchik Gyatso, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for this program today. The American people have a long history of support for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan people. In fact, 3 days from today is the anniversary of the bestowal of the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor that was awarded also to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Similarly, in 1991, the United States Congress passed the Tibetan Immigration Act of 1990, which provided for 1,000 immigrant visas for natives of Tibet in India and Nepal. As a result of this one act of Congress, we have now thriving Tibetan American communities in more than 27 states across the United States. And we are going to learn more about this through our conversations today. Joining us, we have 4 guests. Our first guest has been on our program already several times. He currently heads Tibetan Language Service of Voice America, but he has a long list of accomplishments, including as Kalanchipa, or President of the Central Tibetan Administration. He has also served as representative of His Holiness to the Americas from 1973 to 1986. And also as a special representative of His Holiness to Washington, D.C., and concurrently as the founding president of ICT from 1987 to 1990, during the time that this bill came into effect. So please first join me to welcome Tenzin to our program. Thank you for taking time from your holidays to be with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Our next guest also served as a representative of His Holiness to North America from 1987 to 1997, and later served as president of Tibet Fund in New York. He co-chaired also the Tibetan U.S. Resettlement Project, which successfully resettled the 1,000 Tibetan immigrants in 21 cities across the United States during 1992 to 1993. So please join me to welcome Rinchen La. Thank you for joining us, Rinchen La, for our program. Thank you. And for our viewers watching live, we'll be taking questions at the end of our conversation. So if you have questions, please post them directly under the live stream if you're on Facebook, or you can email them to us at comments@savetibet.org. So let me first begin, Tenzin, by asking you to give us a little history and background to this bill. How did it come about, and what was your involvement?
Thank you. Sure, I'll be happy to start. And let me just give a little background. Although I haven't researched properly on the history of Tibetan immigration to the U.S., but I believe one of the first Tibetans who actually came as an immigrant is Tenzin Tethong, who's a doctor in the San Francisco Bay Area. I believe she came to the United States in 1951. So she may be the first Tibetan immigrant, so to speak. And she is a descendant or great-granddaughter of the gentleman from Darjeeling who became the first police commissioner, Tibetan police commissioner in Lhasa. Anyway, after 1959, when the first refugees came out of Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama appealed to many countries for assistance for refugees, including the resettlement of Tibetans in whichever countries might take them. And as we know, the majority of the Tibetans were given asylum in India primarily, and also given asylum in Bhutan, and many were given asylum in Nepal, but with no proper documentation so far. As for the United States, I believe His Holiness appealed to the United States government, through to the president, And during President Johnson's time, there was some mention of a possibility of this Tibetan immigrants coming to the U.S. But President Johnson did not give a clear answer to the request, simply saying that maybe Tibetans could apply, which in a sense might have meant, you could come, but at that time maybe it didn't seem like a clear-cut answer, and it was not pursued. Later on, small groups of Tibetans came as lumberjacks in Maine under work programs. Some scholars came to Seattle at the University of Washington under a Rockefeller program. And a number of individual Tibetan lamas and scholars and students came to the United States. So by the mid-1980s, there were only about 450 Tibetans living in the United States. And during President Carter's time, His Holiness had made another request for refugees from Bhutan, Tibetans who were at that time having some new issues and possibly having to leave Bhutan. And the Carter administration went through a long process, and at the end, they did not offer any resettlement facilities. But by the mid-80s, there was a renewed effort, which resulted in the immigration of 1,000 Tibetans. And that's a long story, but in essence, it's a story that it's an effort that became successful because a whole host of people at different stages made specific, shall we say, contributions that made it happen and eventually resulted in a bill being passed by the United States Congress allowing for the 1,000 Tibetans. So I think as a start, this is the background to how it happened. And yes, and you said, what was my role? Well, I was involved in that process from the beginning to a very successful completion of 1,000 Tibetans coming by the mid-1990s to the United States.
Thank you. Thank you for that context, Tenzin. Rinchen, I'll ask, you were also very closely involved in this program. So could you speak to some of your thoughts looking back? What were some of the important maybe setbacks and issues that you had to deal with and how they were overcome? What do you recall from those days?
Thank you. The time goes so fast that it has already been 30 years since the adoption of immigration visa for the Tibetan refugees living in India and Nepal. Thank you, Tenzin, for arranging this talk, and Tenzin for the background information. In 1989, Kosu Tenzin Namgyala met with Ed Badner in Boston area, and at that time Ed Badner reported him that Congressman Bernie Frank has an idea of introducing a legislation to allow
May I ask, who was Ed Badner? You and I, we all know Ed Badner, but not everybody listening knows Ed Badner.
Ed Badner is someone who lived in Boston area, Massachusetts area, and he is someone who is very interested with the Tibetan issue, and that's how he happened to meet with Tenzin. Tenzin went to Boston to give a talk on Tibet, and he was in the audience. And after the talk, he approached Tenzin and informed him that Congressman Barney Frank has an idea of bringing 1,000 Tibetans to the United States. In detail, like Congressman Barney Frank said that there is, a lot for bringing 75,000 East Europeans to the United States. And his idea was to reduce 75,000 to 74 and add 1,000 Tibetans. And he thought that this will be, practical, that Tibetans might, get support from the U.S. Congress. And then Ngawang Tenzin, after his return to Washington, D.C., called me to say that he met Ed Badner and he has this idea. Two of us brainstormed. And I actually thought that it would be difficult because that time it was so difficult to get green card even for a single, Tibetan.
Mm-hmm.
But Ngawang said, we have so much support in this country that it could be possible. And then two of us, agreed that we approached the Central Tibetan Administration, and Ngawang wrote to Dharamsala, and which remained unanswered. And then in the meantime, His Holiness Dalai Lama visited United States. And Ngawang Tenzin asked me to schedule an audience for Ed Badner. And I was able to get a slot in New Jersey. And Ed met His Holiness and informed him about Congressman Bernie Frank's idea of bringing 1,000 Tibetans to the States. And His Holiness advised us to discuss among ourselves and also among American friends. So at that time, Tenzin Geshe-la was in the entourage as usual, and Geri Rinpoche, as the Minister for International Relations, was also there. And then Ngawang Tenzin was there, and four of us had thorough discussion with also some of our American supporters. That time, our American friends were against bringing 1,000 Tibetans to the United States with numerous reasons. They said that Tibetans are preserving their unique culture in exile, in settlements, in monasteries, and in schools, and that we are protesting Chinese government for destroying Tibetan culture and Tibetan way of life by making Tibetans a minority in their own country. So by bringing 1,000 Tibetans in the United States, they thought that they will lose their identity in the melting pot of American culture. But they were very much, against this idea. But then we found more advantages in bringing 1,000 Tibetans to the States. First, the United States is no longer a melting pot. There are ethnic groups such as Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, and Indians who are preserving their language and culture, their identity, while fully participating in the American way of life. And then, on the other hand, United States is land of immigrants, and then land of opportunity. And we thought that the Tibetans who would be coming to the States will have a higher standard of life, and their children will also get better education. Then the third reason was that these, compared to the majority of Tibetans in India and Nepal, those who come to the States will economically do better, so they can help their relatives and then the community and overall strengthen Gyaltsen contribution to the CTA. And then lastly, bringing Tibetans to the United States is not only to preserve the Tibetan culture and identity in this country, but to try to bring the dream of, to try to save Tibet itself from dying. So we thought that time, Tibetan community, we were very small, but very, very active. And from ICT, ICT used to send action alerts, and Tibet support groups across the country would write to their representatives on the Capitol Hill. For example, in 1989, there was a huge protest in New York, followed by the big demonstration in Tibet, which was crushed by the military. So many were killed. And then U.S. Tibet Committee members, including some Tibetans, they went to see U.S. ambassador. At that time, it was Ambassador Thomas Pickering. And then ambassador asked them, how many Tibetans are there in New York? And then they replied, oh, we are not more than 60, New York, New Jersey combined. He was so shocked. He looked around and he had said, how come you make such a big noise? That was the situation at that time. So we thought that if a small number of Tibetans are able to make a difference, by bringing 1,000 Tibetans, we thought that we will have additional 1,000 ambassadors who could, make a huge difference. So then we decided, from ourselves, we suggested that it would be a good idea, but for some time, we did not get any response from Kashag. And in 1990, there was a change. Ngawang Tenzin went back to India, and he became one of the cabinet members. And then after that, we got approval from the CTA to go ahead with this program, project. And then Ed Banner, myself, Michelle Bohana from International Campaign for Tibet, and then Senator Kennedy's senior staffer, Gary Smith. Yes. 4 of us went to Dharamsala to discuss the project in details and met with Ngawang Tenzin and other members, including Kumo Gesang Yishila and Jizung Pamela.
Yes. At this point, Rinchen, I was going to, some of what you mentioned, all the people who have been involved in this, you had shared with me a little video, a short video, and should I wanted to play that segment so that explains a little bit, and Tenzin also mentioned how many people were involved in it. So the video clip shows the late Chairman Gyalram Rinpoche explaining the program a little bit. It shows Speaker Pelosi and also a description from Tenzin Tethong, who was the program coordinator in the United States. So if I may, I would like to play that at this point.
I'm Lodi Jalsinjari, and I'm the special envoy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I'm also the president of the International Campaign for Tibet. I would like to talk to you today about the U.S. Tibetan Resettlement project. Now, this is one of the important projects that the Tibetan government in exile and its friends in the United States has undertaken. But the reason why this project is very important for us as the Tibetans on the whole is this is going to give us a tremendous possibility of reaching out to millions of Americans, because all of these Tibetans will become ambassadors in their own way to represent the cause of Tibet, the culture of Tibet, the civilization of Tibet, and also through them carry the message of the Tibetan people inside Tibet, their sufferings, their aspirations.
We had an amendment to the Legal Immigration Act of 1990, which was introduced by Congressman Barney Frank, that provided 1,000 immigrant visas for Tibetan refugees living in India and Nepal. And it passed both houses in the Senate. It was signed into law. That is an enormous victory, because it is a recognition of the separateness of Tibet.
When the Immigration Act of 1990 was passed, Section 134 authorized 1,000 immigrant visas for 1,000 displaced Tibetans in India and Nepal. When the State Department came out with its regulations, it had designated the CTA, the Central Tibetan Administration in Dharamsala, as the agent in charge of the whole process. And the CTA, in turn, designated the Tibetan U.S. Resettlement Project here in the United States as the agent in charge of the whole resettlement process here in the United States. Since this project didn't involve any type of federal funding from the United States government, what we had to prove to the United States authorities was that all 1,000 Tibetans would come here and not become public charges. Now, in order to get the visas, what we had to do was we had to secure 1,000 notarized guaranteed job offers for all 1,000 Tibetans. Besides that, each Tibetan had to be matched up with a sponsor, a home, and a job.
Usually. Yeah.
To everyone who had helped us make this project possible, from the local committees to individuals to the members of Congress who made it possible to introduce the legislation. To everyone in this country, let me express our gratitude on behalf of the Tibetan government and Tibetan people.
小曹，你手说起啊，钱打的，你这是的，还继续啊。
Wow.
So looking back at that video from 1993, Tenzin, as you also mentioned, so many people were involved in it. And then, as Rinchen said, when you headed back to Dharamsala to head the government in exile there, you made the decision to move ahead with this project and give it Kashak's full support. And could you speak about that decision and how and what the impact that you feel has been from the passage of this bill for the Tibetan community?
Sure. Yes. Very briefly. Well, first of all, I think Rinchen speaking and recalling many things, plus seeing the video, refreshed my memory quite a bit. And by way of introduction, I should say that Ed Bednar is, I believe he's the Orthodox priest. And we also met many times at interreligious
Interfaith.
events, one of which was about Thomas Merton, who, is a very famous American figure and had met His Holiness. So that was another element to add to this. And it's true. I think one of the points Rinchen made was that many Americans who were supporters of Tibet thought bringing Tibetans would harm the cause of Tibet. I think it was quite misinformed. And surprisingly, even on the Tibetan end, there were many Tibetans who would say, oh, we should never send any Tibetan abroad because they'll lose their culture and language, while at the same time sending their own family members or close friends as far away as possible whenever opportunities came up. So as you can see, as the story unfolds, each one of us has different recollections. But basically, this whole process was an effort of many, and also trying the right way to shepherd this from an idea to implementation to making it happen. So I was on the front end of an idea coming into fruition and laying the groundwork in the US. And then I somehow found myself in Dharamsala at the next stage in a position to make it happen. So I think just, coincidences, efforts, and the efforts of many.
Yeah. To where we are today. So, Rinchen, would you like to add a few words as well before I invite in our next two guests?
Yes. After returning from Dharamsala, Ed Bednar spearheaded in establishing the Tibetan U.S. Resettlement Project. At that time, the Tibet Fund and the Office of Tibet Board a small townhouse not far from the United Nations. And we were able to provide office space for the Tibetan U.S. Resettlement Project. And the board members of the U.S. Tibetan Resettlement Project met for several weeks, and without, coming to an agreement how we are going to bring 1,000 Tibetans to United States, how we are going to employ, and how we are going to help with their travel arrangements, so and so on. So one day, remarkably, one of the board members suggested that we find 1,000 1,000 sponsors for each of the 1,000 Tibetan immigrants. And everyone liked this idea very much. And everyone in the board thought that we have so much support in this country that it will be very easy to find 1,000 sponsors for 1,000 Tibetans. But then, we remembered the remarks by our American friends that this is a melting pot. And so we thought that if we send Tibetans to wherever we find sponsors, then they will be scattered all around, and then we will definitely they will lose their cultural identity. So the idea of setting cluster sites then came. Then we decided to settle the Tibetans in cluster sites, and to become a cluster site, the committee has to assure a minimum of 25 sponsors in one city. New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, these cities were considered exceptional because there were already Tibetan community living in these cities. Other than this, in a new city, we made it condition to assure at least 25 sponsors. So that way we were able to establish 21 cluster sites in 18 states.
Thank you, Rinchen, for explaining that. That took a lot of people and a lot of friends and supporters, many of whom still stay in touch. And now our next two guests we have who are families of the 1,000 immigrants and from those cluster sites that you mentioned. So first, our first guest, we have Ngawang Dolkar. Ngawang Dolkar is president of the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota, which has one of the largest Tibetan populations in America. And she is also an attorney by profession, specializing in immigration law. Her family was part of the original 1,000 immigrants. So, Ngawang, welcome to our program. We also have president of Tibetan Association of Colorado, Tenzin Jigme. He is also a successful business development and sales executive by his profession. His family was also part of the original 1,000 Tibetans as part of that immigration. So, Jigme, thank you. Welcome, both of you, to our program. I wanted to ask, we heard from Tenzin and Rinchen the background of the bill, and as your families, your parents came here as part of this original 1,000, can you share a little bit each of what your family experience, how it was for you? Ngawang, maybe we can start with you first.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for having me here. I'm originally from Dharamsala, India, and I went to upper TCB school until 4th grade. So my mom was one of the visa lottery winners, and so she came here in 1992, and the rest of our family members came here in 1996. I had just turned 9 years old, and my sister was 6. Initially, it was very challenging learning the American system. Life in India is very fun for a child. We could go outside, go to the store by ourselves, and there wasn't much need for an adult supervision, and parents didn't have to worry so much. So there was a huge culture shock for all of us when we arrived in America. We couldn't get around much without a car, and hearing a foreign language everywhere we went. So that was difficult at the beginning, but we knew we had to adapt. My mom worked at a laundry facility, and my dad got a minimum paying job at a meat factory working overnight, so that he could spend time during the day with us. So we understand that our parents made a lot of sacrifices so that we could have a better life and more opportunities than they had. So over the time, we have learned a lot and adapted. But one thing that I was made aware of was how important it was to keep speaking in Tibetan and not losing our identity, because it is so easy to do that living here in another country where Tibetan is not a primary language. So my family, we've lived here in Minnesota since our arrival, and then I've always been involved with our community since high school through various organizations like SFT, RTYC, Youth for Umilam, and then with our Tibetan Community Center here. Both me and my sister, we went to school here. I got my bachelor's and JD here. My sister went to college in Maine. But yeah, for all of these, we are very grateful for His Holiness, to all those involved in getting the bill passed, our families, my husband, everyone working hard to keep our identity strong and alive. I now have 3 little kids myself, so I want to teach them the values I've learned growing up, and also teach them the importance of preserving our culture and our identity.
Yep, thank you, Ngawang. And Jigme, please, you would share your thoughts.
So first of all, thank you for inviting me, Tenchula, and it is my pleasure to meet Kumu Tedula and Kumu Rinchen here virtually. And Tenchula already introduced since July, I've served as the president of the Tibetan Association of Colorado. And it is really amazing to reflect back on the fact that 30 years ago, my father, his name is Paulin Mudum, and along with 999 Tibetans were the lucky lottery winners through the 1991 Tibetan Resettlement Program. My mother, sister, and I eventually immigrated to the U.S. in 98 after my dad naturalized. I was 18 at the time, and my sister was 14. So personally, I think we were just happy to be together as a family, and also in all of this country that offers so much in terms of opportunity. Our journey through through high school, college, and professional life, I can't really think of anything unique to really share with you that may be worthwhile. We assimilated as much as necessary, and thankfully, because of our parents' care and guidance, we didn't face any challenges, so to speak, and that we couldn't overcome. And however, again, as I reflect back, the one thing that holds some weight in our experience as a family living in our new life in US, it is the vivid memory that I really have of the tremendous amount of sacrifice my parents had made to give us the best possible chance to succeed in life. And whether it was to, practice His Holiness advice to be kind, compassionate, or just to simply study hard as all our parents asked us to do. So, recollecting the struggles of my parents, just like Ngawang and mentioned, I think that was the vivid memory that I still have, where my father, before he immigrated to the U.S., he was the 10th grade math teacher in Central Tibetan School in Mungud, and before he moved to the U.S. And my mother, Karma Palzum, she was a teacher in a primary school in Camp 7, and those were all revered professions, and they took pride in their work. So I cannot imagine the challenges of moving to a foreign country with language barrier, perhaps only in communication style and accent. Nevertheless, it still makes it very difficult. And my father in particular, he worked in 2 shifts, for 6 days, maybe some days 7 days, in 2 different fast food restaurants. And because his degree was not honored over here, and for several years, he just did that so he could send money back home and pay for my high school fees. So, and my mother, again, she worked at an awning manufacturing company for several years, which again is very physically taxing. And I remember those days. So, it is just through just their perseverance, through the early struggles that me and my sister, we were able to have a comfortable life and prioritize education. So, like again, like Nawala, I'm sure there's so many similar stories as ours with the other individuals and their family members as well. And so, yeah, I think maybe it is in our human nature that sometimes we do forget where we come from and all of the direct and the indirect, causes and conditions that have really led to essentially where and who we are right now. So I'm very grateful to the chief architects of the Tibetan Resettlement Program, and obviously our undying devotion and love for His Holiness, for the foresight that all of y'all had to pursue such lofty goals, to empower so many Tibetans to not only be financially independent, but also be ambassadors of Tibet and preserve and share our unique culture to the world. So my heartfelt gratitude to all.
Yeah. Thank you, Jingala, for putting that very eloquently. I also, from the beginning, especially the 1,000 immigrants, had a real strong sense of being ambassadors for Tibet. And I think even the administration and even in His Holiness, I think we saw in that little clip, everybody got an audience and a little gift from His Holiness that people cherished, and people really took their responsibility as not just another immigrant coming here, but also shouldering a greater responsibility for Tibet. And with that, two of you are presidents of your own communities. And can you want to hear a little bit of, I talked earlier of thriving Tibetan communities in North America. So Ngawang, you're the president of one of the largest clusters of Tibetans living in North America. Can you share, a little about your community in Minnesota? How do you keep your roots? What are things that connect you? What are some challenges? I mean, I'm sure it's a broad thing to cover, but maybe in a few minutes you could share.
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, Minnesota was one of the cluster locations, and initially, from my understanding, there were about 160 people placed here. Mm-hmm. And so the previous board members, they've worked so hard to build a foundation that we have now, and it's a growing population. They started the Tibetan language school and music classes back in '97 with the specific goal of preserving our rich culture and language. So I believe it's our duty to continue their work and make the improvements with our growing population. Since the initial group of 160 Tibetans, due to relocation and migration, we estimate now that we have about 5,000 Tibetans living in Minnesota. We still have our previous community center, but it's too small. So last year we purchased a larger community center. And so our community provides so much for our members, and we work very well together. We still have the weekend Tibetan language classes offered to kindergartens through 8th grade, and currently we have about 170 students enrolled this year. Our music program has about 60 kids. We also have Lamdun, which is a mentoring and tutoring program for students getting ready to go to college. This was initially started by several college students, and this was very much needed in our community because, as the initial students going into college, our parents didn't know the process, filling out FAFSA, college applications, preparing essays and things like that. So we didn't have that guidance back then. But so then this Lamdun was created so that we could later provide the assistance to future high school students so that they have the help that their parents couldn't provide. And now we also have Tibetan Kids Club for toddlers and younger students to stay active and learn about our culture. We also work in collaboration with our local nonprofits with community service programs and other events. Just last weekend, we had our annual flu shot clinic and COVID vaccines to our community members. So then that way, they didn't have to worry about making an appointment, or our elders who didn't speak English, so we would have interpreters readily available during these clinic. And then so we try to do our best to provide for our community members. We understand the struggles people are facing when they are unsure of the system or when they're new to the country. We've experienced it. So that's why we provide resources to our community members so that they don't have to struggle like previous members have had. Something that I'm really proud of our Tibetan community, unlike, Tibetans are refugees, but we are not considered a refugee in this country. And those who did come to this country as a refugee, they had the benefit of receiving public assistance. So and Tibetans, they didn't come with a refugee visa, they came with an immigrant visa. And so they weren't eligible for public assistance. So what I'm proud of is that Tibetans worked very hard to stand up on their own 2 feet. This shows that Tibetans have self-determination and are self-sufficient. This is how our community has grown and improved. And some of the challenges that I see, language is obviously a difficulty to our younger generation. We are, everywhere we look at school, TV, everything is in English. So it is difficult for the younger kids who are born in this country to preserve, but it's our duty as parents to continue speaking and teaching that to our kids. And then another challenge that I see is that, participation by younger generation is much lower, and I would hope and I would like to see that improve in the future.
Thank you, Mala. And Jigme, Colorado, again, you have a smaller community, but you also quite spread out community, but then growing also because we have many people moving there now. So could you share what your experience is like, a little bit about your community?
Sure. So, we are a small community here. We're not as spread out right now. I think we probably reside within 30-mile radius. Everybody are around a certain geographic area. And so my father's sponsor, late sponsor, Albin, he lived here in Colorado, and I did not really feel like, that Colorado was a great place when I was 18. I really thought I wanted to be in New York or California. So now looking back, I'm so lucky to be living in Colorado with a vibrant and a growing Tibetan community here. And Tenzin can attest to it. You've lived here before, and it is a beautiful, beautiful.
The mountains remind you of Tibet.
Yes, of course. And that's what we keep hearing from, especially from Tibetans who were either born in Tibet or had visited Tibet, that this really reminds them of Tibet. So initially in the beginning, early 90s, there were about roughly 20 Tibetans, I would say, that moved to Colorado under the Resettlement program. And our current estimate is that there are about 500 to 600 Tibetans living in Colorado. And we do live very close, actually, and it's very easy to congregate now. And one of the things that I do want to mention is that our TSC board, we have a very aggressive campaign that we have initiated to collect accurate census info with key data points that people are willing to share with us that can be useful within our first year, which I believe will be a very sound foundation to initiate targeted campaigns and such. So this has been something in our minds, but we are finally rolling it out, and hopefully in the future we can, say with concrete affirmation that we have this many Tibetans with this many age groups and with all the demographic info. So we hope to have that within a year. And again, it is also interesting to hear from our speakers, Rinchen Dharlo, that the preservation of the Tibetan language and culture was one of the main concerns in the beginning of this resettlement project. Because fast forward to now, and there's probably unanimous consensus by all the Tibetan associations across North America that this really is one of our biggest challenge to ensure our young generation children that are born and brought up in America are able to speak, read, and write in Tibetan language. I can speak on behalf of the TSC that supporting our weekend Tibetan cultural school is one of our main priority. We are so grateful to our volunteer language, song and dance teachers, and for dedicating their precious time and effort. It is very challenging considering we do not have a community center yet. We are working hard towards it, by the way, and with COVID still not behind us, we continue to teach our language classes via Zoom, which obviously has its own sets of challenges. And all the challenges notwithstanding, we are firm in our resolute to build on what we have and ensure that we foster and provide a quality learning space for our children so they can grow up with a sense of Tibetan identity and take pride in learning their Tibetan language and culture. So one of my goal and aspiration for the Tibetan community in Colorado is to grow. Like I've mentioned this before in our pre-meeting as well, and I just wanted to elaborate a bit on it, which is to grow a community engagement with the TSC in particular, the association, and to have affinity towards the association and a sense of us. I've mentioned this to a friend or two, and unfortunately, I'm usually met with pessimism. And objectively speaking, it does seem tricky or difficult because how do you measure it, and what are the metrics, right, to define its success or failures? So, anyways, instead of being bogged down with the idea of measuring the success of every campaign or initiative pertaining to the goal of growing community engagement with the TSC, within the community, we just plan on wholeheartedly working for and with the community by initiating many campaigns and events that engage the community, and hopefully that will rid of the apathy that and engage meaningfully, essentially. So finally, on behalf of the Tibetans in Colorado, I would once again like to express my heartfelt gratitude to His Holiness and to all that were involved in the Tibetan Resettlement project. Since the 20 Tibetans moved here to Colorado in the early 90s, we have spread the good word and how it is wonderful to live here in Colorado. And there are many, many Tibetans moving here from out of state. And we hope that it continues, which we definitely think it will. So once again, thank you, Tenzin, for giving me the opportunity.
You may have more people, more Tibetans moving to Colorado after hearing this show and you're speaking about it, especially if you have a community center soon. At this point, we do want to try and take some audience questions in. I just wanted to add one comment from Bill Payne on Facebook. It says, I served on the steering committee on the Burlington, Vermont resettlement cluster site. And he says, I was there when the first groups of Tibetans arrived. We were able to see His Holiness in Montreal with some of the newly resettled Tibetans in 1994. I moved away from Burlington soon after that and lost contact with the project. But over the years, it has been really wonderful to see the activities of the new communities of Tibetans around the U.S. And with that, I wanted to also add that really, I also, for my on my work, I get to travel around and meet a lot of Tibetan communities everywhere, and I'm like so proud of our community. We have like doctors, nurses, teachers, healthcare workers, police officers, postal workers, congressional staffers, and people working at the White House. And it's just amazing who you meet sometimes on the street, and you realize they are Tibetan, and we find them in all different walks of American society now, not only contributing to America's society, but also carrying forward our own heritage and the plight of our homeland. And both of you, Ngawang and Tenzin Jigme, you are, products of this community that we are really proud to see, especially younger ones. When you take leadership roles, it impacts the future for every one of us. Now, I do want to have one question here, that is, many challenges that I've heard from Tibetans is connection with their family members back in Tibet. So, I mean, that continues to be an issue that comes up with us. Have you faced that in your communities of restrictions? Even though you are American citizens, you have, in every aspect, you're American, but when you try to get a visa for Tibet, you are not, you are cast aside as Tibetans. Is that something you have faced? Because that's something that we have been trying to work on, and through the reciprocal access to Tibet bill, it's something we try to track also for our organization.
I could just make a quick comment on that. Just through word of mouth within the community, yes, I have recently, there's been even more denial of visa to even Tibetan Americans who are trying to visit, or even Tibetan Americans that have visited Tibet before. So there's definitely no entry. I think there's a real harsh stance right now, perhaps because of COVID and other, political reasons as well. But there definitely is a hard, metal cage door right now, and which prevents Tibetans from accessing, their homeland, for sure.
Ngawang, did you want to speak to that?
I personally haven't gotten any news from anybody locally, but I have seen on social media from other local members who have visited Tibet. So I saw pictures and things like that, but personally, no one has mentioned that they had challenges going to Tibet or getting their visas denied. So as of now, I don't have much information on that.
And then, if I might add something to that, which is we do encourage our community members who do attempt to go to Tibet, if their visas are denied, to report it, to the State Department, so that it can be tagged as such, and then hopefully I think it is twice a year or something, where they do an assessment. So hopefully it can come up in that reciprocal act. Through that act, they can ensure that, Tibetans are getting proper access to Tibet as well.
Thank you, Jigme. And one question also for both of you. We have many American friends and ICT members who want to be connected with Tibetan communities. And if they are listening here today, how would you recommend American friends, if they want to be engaged with, involved in Tibetan community events locally? What do you recommend?
Okay. Well, Our community in Minnesota, we have our website, tafm.org. We are also active on social media through Facebook. Most of our events, we do go live, so it is available worldwide. In the past few years, our Facebook has been getting a lot of attention worldwide. So it's great to see, we are some of our board members, during like Tungar, when they're dancing in the circle Gorshe dance, their relatives are sending screenshots saying like, "Hey, I saw you on Facebook," So it's been nice using that. But non-Tibetans who want to participate, our event informations are always shared on social media through our Facebook. We have an office manager who's at our community center working, and so any questions, they're free to contact our office or email. We always respond.
So as far as the outreach to Tibetan Association of Colorado, I would break it into two. One is if you just want to mingle and be a part of the community and enjoy the events. Of course, on our website, there will be events posted, and you are more than welcome to join us. And on the other hand, if you feel like you have certain skill sets that can be useful to us for the Tibetan community, send us a direct email, which you will find on our website, info@coloradotibetans.org, and we would be happy to engage with you and see where we could use your services.
Thank you. And with that, I think we are running we've run out of time, but I want to give the floor to Tenzin and Rinchen, if you would like to add any last comments before we close.
Sure. I would like to just say that, there are easily 1,000 great stories behind this resettlement project. And I think the fact that you are bringing everybody in together to review what's happened and share this with people, I think it's a wonderful effort. And I think one of the only communities that actually done a proper documentation of the settlement stories is our community in Boston. A few of the younger members of the community with other produced a wonderful book about the Tibetan community in Boston. So I think that's a good example for all other communities to try and follow. It's not too late, nor is it too early to start documenting and putting our stories together. I think this, we thought that 1,000 Tibetans coming to the US will be an important event. I think it's important, it could grow over the years if we continue to tell our stories well. So that's what I would like everyone to try and do. Thank you.
The Tibetan US Resettlement Project, spearheaded by Ed Bednar, with support of the Office of Tibet, the International Campaign for Tibet, and above all, the hardworking and dedicated cluster site coordinators, is one of the most successful program in the US immigration history. The initial 1,000 immigrants multiplied into several thousand Tibetans. We now have well over 25,000 Tibetans in the United States with 27 Tibetan associations. Many of these Tibetan associations have purchased community centers. The Tibetans across the United States have preserved Tibet's unique culture in various ways. There are established formal weekend Tibetan schools. Tibetan communities gather to celebrate various cultural holidays throughout the year. Many of the Tibetans who came under Tibetan US Resettlement Project have bought houses, and many of their children have graduated from reputed American universities with professional degrees, including doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc. With help of a filmmaker, Ken Young, we are currently working to complete a long-standing documentary project of the Tibetan U.S. Resettlement Project. I'm glad Tenzin has shown a part of it today, and we hope to complete this documentary project by the end of 2022. And yes, as Tenzin mentioned, I've also seen the book brought by the Tibetan immigrants in Boston, which is really very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinchen. And we look forward to the film as well. And I'm so glad that somebody took interviews and filmed the process all those years back. And now that should be very interesting to see. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope our viewers found it interesting as well. And with that, I'd just like to add, we'll be back next month with another episode of Tibet Talks. It'll be Thursday, November 4th. We'll be discussing a new book, This Fragile Planet, with the author, environmentalist, adventure travel writer, Michael Buckley. It's a wonderful book featuring many inspiring quotes of His Holiness, and the conversation will focus on the Tibetan Plateau and the intersection of serious human rights and environmental challenges that it faces today. The book is available online, but we hope to soon have copies on our ICT web store. With that, please join us Thursday, November 4th. Our past talks are archived on ICT's YouTube channel and also on our podcast. You can visit savetibet.org/live to learn more and also to join our mailing list and get alerts of our upcoming talks. Thank you for all our viewers for your interest, dedication, and support for Tibet. The more people care about Tibet, the bigger the impact we can have. So thank you. And with that, until next time, please stay safe, stay well, and that's it from us. Thank you.